Hey guys, my name's Joe Bach, and today I want to show you my 1994 7.3 liter Powerstroke Bronco. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit of backstory on it. I started out with a 1996 Ford Bronco for my first car. Great truck, had a 6-inch lift on 35s. I've had it now for 7 years. The first year I had it, I ended up rebuilding most of it with my dad. And I've driven it all the way through high school and college, and even started my first real job with it. Now though, I've grown up a little bit, I bought a newer truck, and I have time to focus on my new project, which is the 7.3 Bronco. What I got here is basically everything my first Bronco lacked. The Bronco got me around forever and it was reliable, but you always want a little bit more. You always want a little bit more lift, you always want a little bit more power, you always want a little bit bigger of tires. So that's what I have here. To start off, I might as well run into the most interesting part, the heart of it all, the 7.3 Powerstroke. I got this out of a 1995 F250, and it was a good running motor. It just needed to be resealed and probably rebuilt injectors. However, I took it a step farther than that. I went and I resealed it. I put in new 1830 injectors, and that's where the fun started. After that, I went and I got a KC38R turbo off of Super Duty, and then all of the exhaust manifolds off of Super Duty as well, and the intercooler piping, the intercooler. From there, I was able to go and put on a 4-inch downpipe off of Super Duty to a 5-inch stainless steel exhaust. And also, I put an e-fuel setup on it. Looking through this thing, I'm hoping to be making about 400 horsepower and 800 foot-pounds of torque. So, it's a bit to ask out of a Bronco, so I beefed everything up along the way too. For cooling, I got a nice new aluminum radiator. That's also off this 95 F350 or F250. So behind the engine, I have an E4OD. This was rebuilt in-house by yours truly. Nothing too crazy with it. Just your standard rebuild, aside from a shift kit and a new torque converter. The torque converter is a little bit lower of stall torque, and it's got a billet torque, or it's billet. Behind that, you have your standard BW1356, I believe, manual shift transfer case, also rebuilt by me. New seals, bearings, nothing too crazy with that. Going behind that, I'm going to get a custom-built drive shaft, most likely from Drive Shaft Superstore. I need something that goes and can take such an extreme angle, and also with being a Bronco, it's very short. So there's a lot of drop, a lot of angle being asked of it. Behind that, I've got a Sterling 1025. It's got 410 gears in it and a factory shift or a factory limited slip. The limited slip will probably come out at some point, and I'll put in a selectable locker. What I have up front there is a rough stuff torque tamer or anti-track bar or anti-wrap bar. Just because with the amount of lift in these springs and the amount of torque coming out of that engine, I'm afraid of the axle wrapping. So that should be able to keep it in place a little bit better, keep my rear geometry where it should be. Now powering this beast, fueling this beast, is a 33-gallon fuel tank out of a 78 Bronco. It was originally in a carbureted Bronco, so there was no in-tank fuel pump. Instead of just a fuel pickup and a gauge for your float. I have hooked up in front of it a 444 Lab 444 e-fuel kit. That e-fuel kit runs all the way up to the front. It replaces the stock mechanical fuel pump. Then we have a return line here. Up front, I have a Dana 60 out of an F350. It's got 410 gears in it and an open differential for now. I'd like to go to a selectable locker in the future, but that's once I have everything up and running. For armor, I have a Dana 60 cover from Rough Stuff, and one of their steering kits that I custom fabricated. As you can see, I have a PSC hydraulic assist ram that goes into my blue top steering gear that's been tapped for hydraulic assist. That should make turning these monster tires a little bit easier. I originally didn't plan on going with the tire so large, but I got such a killer deal on these I couldn't pass it up. They're 43-inch Super Swampers, and they're for a 16.5-inch rim. Most people don't really care for the 16.5-inch rims because you have to worry about them coming off the bead if you air down. But luckily I have a set of recentered bead locks off a Humvee. They got the rock rings on them and everything, so I'm looking forward to going and putting them all together and seeing them all done. So for the base of this project, I have a 1994 Bronco frame. This was at a truck that I found locally. The body was pretty eaten up, but the frame was in overall good shape. The only thing I had to replace on it was a few of where the body mounts going in the back. I cut them out, welded in plates, and drilled all the holes needed. But one thing that's kind of unique about this though, is that I brought it down and got it hot dip galvanized. It's the same thing that happens on guardrails. So it's actually rated for 50 years submerged in salt water to be rust resistant for that long. And before I got it hot dip galvanized, I did all my welding too, because you don't want to weld after it's galvanized. It releases toxic fumes. It's not a good deal. So I went and I welded on my Sky Off-Road leaf hangers in the front here, so I could do leaf springs on my Dana 60. So I welded on my hanger for my front suspension, but also one thing I was worried about was the rivets in the frame. I plan on using this truck for a bit of off-roading, with it having as much torque as it does, and as much as I plan on using it, I'm afraid of the rivets getting loose. The frame will go and tweak, and the rivets will slowly loosen up, and you end up with your cross members loose. So what I also did before galvanizing it was put in welds all over on my cross members to keep everything in place, so I'm not relying purely on the rivets. The last thing I did structurally on the frame, actually the last two things I did structurally on the frame were I put in this cross member here to stiffen it up. That's also where I tie in my anti-wrap bar. And I also made a modification to my frame here in front of my transfer case. Due to there being so much lift, I had to actually notch the transfer case cross member, or the transmission cross member, to fit the front drive shaft. You can see in here the notching. I welded in a piece of pipe, so I'm now able to go full droop and not have my front drive shaft hit. Over here I have the electrical system of the truck. This is everything that you'd mostly find behind the dash or right directly under the hood. So you got your cluster, your steering column, your bezel, which has your wait to start lights. I put this all out here just for testing purposes. I was actually able to get the truck started and running with just what you see here. It was the biggest problem with doing this. You just have to find all the grounds, make sure they're hooked up to a good connection. But once I got that all figured out, we're pretty much set to go, and the truck fires right up. Hopefully in the next video I'll be able to show you guys that. Going forward from here, I have the original Bronco body from my 96. I'm looking to swap that in after bedlining the underside and bedlining the interior, as well as sound deadening. And then I'll swap all these electronics into the dash, and I should have a running truck. From there it'll just be troubleshooting and testing. So hopefully you'll be able to see that in coming videos. That'll wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, would like to learn more about anything, please let me know.